The first light of morning slipped through the cracks of the curtains, soft and pale, but there was nothing gentle about the air inside that room. It was heavy, the kind of stillness that presses on the heart before the day even begins. 9-year-old Mara Lee stood barefoot in front of a cracked mirror, her small fingers tracing the purplish bruise blooming around her left eye. It wasn't her first. It wasn't even the worst. But somehow, this one felt different. Maybe it was because she'd stopped crying about them. Maybe because she'd stopped believing anyone would care. The mirror's reflection showed more than just her face. It showed the tiredness in her posture, the slouch of someone who had been taught, too early, that silence was safer than truth. Behind her, in the dimly lit corner of the room, rested an old backpack, patched, frayed, and faded from years of wear. It was the only thing that truly belonged to her. Inside it were a few notebooks, a cracked pencil case, and a secret letter she had written to herself weeks ago. Don't give up. That morning, as she pulled her uniform over her small shoulders, she whispered to her reflection, no more lies. She wasn't going to tell her teacher she fell again. She wasn't going to pretend she tripped down the stairs. Today, she was going to find help, real help. The street outside was gray and cold. She walked to school with her head down, her sneakers flapping at the soles, each step heavy and uncertain. Cars rolled past, adults hurried to work, and no one looked twice at the little girl walking alone. Her uniform hung too loose, her hair unbrushed, her eyes too old for her age. But she kept walking, clutching her backpack strap as though it were a lifeline. Behind that black eye lived a story few had ever tried to see. A mother lost to the bottle and the shadows of addiction, a father who had vanished before she could even speak his name, and a man her mother now lived with, a man whose rage came quicker than breath. The neighbors heard things, the teachers saw things, but everyone told themselves it wasn't their place to interfere. By lunchtime, Mara sat alone at the edge of the playground. The laughter of other children filled the air like bells, bright and cruel at the same time. She picked at her sandwich, pretending not to notice the group of older girls whispering near the slide. Look at her eye, one of them said. Bet she deserved it. Mara looked down at her lap. The words stung worse than the bruise. She wished she could vanish into the earth, become invisible. Then, from the distance, a sound broke through the noise of recess, low, steady, powerful. It started as a faint rumble and grew louder, closer, echoing through the sleepy town like thunder. She looked up. Beyond the chain-link fence, a long line of motorcycles rolled down the road, their engines growling, sunlight bouncing off the chrome. The riders were dressed in black leather and denim, helmets gleaming, the kind of people her teachers always warned her about. But something about them, the freedom, the fearlessness, pulled her gaze and wouldn't let go. For a moment, she forgot the ache in her chest. When the final bell rang, Mara didn't go straight home. She took the long way, following the faint sound of engines until she saw them again. The bikes parked outside a diner on the corner of Ridgeway Street. Her stomach fluttered with nerves, but something inside her, something stubborn and desperate, pushed her forward. The bell over the diner door jingled softly as she stepped inside. The smell of bacon, coffee, and gasoline hung thick in the air. 24 men sat around the room, laughter and deep voices bouncing off the walls. Leather vests, tattoos, beards, everything about them screamed danger. One of them, a broad man with graying hair and soft eyes behind a weathered face, looked up first. Hey, sweetheart, he said, his voice rough but kind. You lost. Mara froze. Her throat was dry, her hands shaking against the straps of her backpack. For a long moment, no sound came out. Then, in a voice so fragile it barely carried, she whispered, "Can one of you be my dad?" The diner went silent. Forks clinked against plates and stopped. 20 pairs of eyes turned to her, unsure what they had just heard. The man with the gray hair stood, his boots creaking on the old wood floor. He crouched down in front of her. "Sweetheart," he said gently, "what happened to your eye?" Mara didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence told them more than words ever could. Within minutes, one of them brought over a blanket from his bike, another poured her a cup of hot chocolate, another found her a cookie. They didn't ask too many questions at first. They just listened to the small voice that trembled as she spoke about nights filled with yelling, about hiding in closets, about wishing someone would just take her away. These men weren't saints. Their hands were scarred, their pasts messy. But as they listened, something changed in the room. The same men who had once faced bar fights and jail cells found themselves quietly wiping their eyes, shaking their heads. That night, none of them rode off. They stayed. They called child protection, told the police everything, and made sure Mara was taken somewhere safe. One of them, the gray-haired man, rode with her in the back of the police car, promising her she'd never have to go back. By morning, word had spread. A 9-year-old girl had walked into a biker diner asking for a father, and found 27 of them instead. But what happened next no one could have predicted. At 8:15 the next morning, as students poured into East Hollow Elementary, the familiar rumble of motorcycles echoed down the quiet street. Teachers froze mid-sentence. Parents in the parking lot stopped and stared. The children pressed their faces against the windows, eyes wide with wonder. One by one, 27 motorcycles rolled up to the school gate, engines purring, sunlight bouncing off the polished metal. The leader dismounted, holding a small pink backpack in his hand, the same one Mara had left behind the night before. Inside her classroom, Mara sat frozen in her seat. When she saw them through the glass, her heart began to race. For the first time in her life, someone had shown up for her. They didn't go inside. They didn't have to. Their presence was enough. They stood there like sentinels, leather vests glinting, arms crossed, faces solemn. They weren't there to scare anyone. They were there to send a message. She's not alone anymore. The principal came running out, his face pale and nervous. You can't be here, he stammered. This is a school. The leader smiled faintly and said, we know. We're just making sure she gets inside safe. That moment, that image of 27 bikers standing guard over a little girl, would spread across the town, then across the country. Some called it inappropriate, others called it beautiful, but to Mara, it was everything. That afternoon, she was placed with a foster family, a kind couple who had lost a daughter years before. They gave her a room of her own, a place to sleep without fear, and a reason to believe that not all grown-ups turned away. Years passed, the bruises faded, but the memories remained, not of the pain, but of the people who stood up when the world didn't. Mara grew into a strong, compassionate woman. She went to college, studied social work, and later founded a non-profit organization dedicated to helping abused children find safety and hope. On the wall of her office hung a photograph, a faded image of 27 bikers standing outside a school, sunlight cutting across their shoulders. And every year, without fail, a postcard would arrive in the mail. It was always signed the same way. Ride safe, little angel. If Mara's story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Because kindness isn't just about being gentle, it's about being brave. It's about showing up when no one else will. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done if a child like Mara asked you for help? Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's found in the people who see your pain and refuse to walk away. That's what kindness really means. Standing tall when the world looks away, and proving that even the roughest hearts can still shine with compassion.